They say revenge tastes sweet. But mine tasted like black coffee at 3 a.m., cold sweat on a cracked phone screen, and tears I swore I'd never cry again. My name is Elena Ward, and I never believed life could chew a person up so fast. 1 year, I was leading a team, confident, respected. The next, I was standing in line at a food bank, praying no one from my old company would recognize me. But this story isn't about losing everything. It's about what happened when the woman who broke me watched me walk back through the same doors she once ruled, to levels above her. And trust me, when karma finally came for her, it had my name written all over it. I used to think hard work could fix anything. Bills, stress, even bad luck. Just grind harder, push through, and it'll even out eventually. Right. That illusion shattered last year. The day I got the layoff email, I remember sitting in my car, in the company parking lot, watching my husband, James, stare at his own phone in disbelief. We both got the same message at the same time. Due to economic conditions, the rest of it blurred together. We just sat there, two people who had spent years climbing ladders, suddenly realizing the ground had vanished beneath us. That night, I told him we'd be okay. We weren't. Within a month, savings drained, credit cards maxed. Every day felt like a new kind of panic. So when that email came, "We'd love to have you on our team," I didn't care that the title was smaller, the pay was lower, or the office was across town. I just needed something solid. Something to keep the lights on and the fear quiet. The manager, Gary, seemed kind. The team sounded supportive. For the first time in months, I exhaled. That was my first mistake. Gary was one of those rare managers who actually listened. During the interview, he asked more about what I wanted to learn than what I'd done. But he was busy, always in meetings, calls, fires to put out. So, not long after I started, he handed me off to her. "Jane, you know those people who smile like they're testing how far they can push you?" That was Jane. At first, she played nice, complimented my work ethic, said things like, "You've got potential, Elena, but you'll need to toughen up to survive here." I thought she meant it as advice. She did and single quotes T. Within a week, my inbox became her personal command center. Emails at midnight, texts during dinner. "Quick favor, can you hop on a call? Need you to move your vacation. Lunch break? We've got deadlines." The first time she said, "You're a bit big for your race, aren't you?" I actually laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. And it wasn't the last comment like that. I'd come home exhausted, angry, humiliated, then wake up and do it again because the mortgage didn't care how I felt. Micromanagement isn't just annoying. It's a slow erosion of your confidence. Every time I thought I could handle something on my own, Jane would jump in. "Let me review before you send that. I don't like how you phrased this. Maybe I should just take over the presentation." I began second-guessing myself constantly. It's funny, people think bullies scream. Jane didn't need to. She could cut me apart with a whisper. When she called me at 11:23 on a Saturday night about a typo in a report that hadn't even been submitted yet, I stared at my phone for a long time. Then I answered, because fear disguised as professionalism can make you do stupid things. James tried to talk to me. "You can't let her treat you like that." But what was I supposed to do? Quit? We had bills, hospital expenses, and an upcoming funeral for my aunt. Survival doesn't leave room for pride, so I stayed. The breaking point wasn't even spectacular. No screaming match, no public scene, just A Friday afternoon, Jane was furious that I scheduled a meeting without including one of her people, someone I'd never even met. She tore into me over a call, voice sharp and cold. I remember staring at my screen, tears threatening, when my mother texted, "Call me. It's about Aunt Marie. She'd passed away that morning." I muted the call, stared out the window, and something inside me snapped. When Jane finished ranting, I said, "Jane, I need to step away. There's been a death in the family." She replied without missing a beat. "Then reschedule your emotions for Monday, Elena. We're on a deadline." That was it. The glass shattered. I broke down in the middle of my living room. The kind of crying that doesn't make noise because you've already run out of sound. That evening, I called Gary. He didn't sound surprised. "Half her team's already quit," he said quietly. "I'll move you under me directly. You've been through enough." I thought it was over. It wasn't. For a couple weeks, things actually got better. Gary was protective, understanding, but Jane couldn't let go. Emails kept coming. Demands, comments, snide remarks. When I ignored her, she showed up at my desk, in person, and started loudly criticizing my qualifications. Gary overheard, finally snapping back at her in front of everyone. But words don't stop people like her. They feed off control. After 2 months of enduring her shadow, I had enough. I wrote my resignation letter, stapled 3 pages of her insults, and CC'd everyone, HR, leadership. All of them. Gary begged me to stay, offered adjustments, remote work, scheduled changes, but I told him the only way I'd stay is if she left. He didn't have the power to make that happen, so I left. Loudly. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Freedom didn't feel like victory. It felt like fear. For 3 months, James and I barely survived. There were nights when dinner was 2 slices of bread. Days when I applied to 10, 15, 20 jobs and got nothing. I'd sit at my laptop until sunrise, rewriting cover letters, tweaking resumes, convincing myself tomorrow would be different. It wasn't. I started to believe Jane had stolen something permanent from me. Not just a job, but my belief in myself. Then one morning, while scrolling LinkedIn, I saw a post that made me stop cold. A familiar name. A big name. A former executive from my old company. A man I'd worked closely with years ago was joining the company I'd just left. I don't know what possessed me, but I sent a quick text. "Congrats. Let me know if you ever want insights on the new place. I've got a few." He called me that afternoon. We caught up, laughed, reminisced about old projects. Then he asked, almost casually, "Why'd you leave them?" So I told him, carefully, but honestly. 2 days later, he called again. "Elena," he said, "I want you on my team. Chief of Staff." I accepted before I could even blink. 3 months after walking out those doors in tears, I walked back in, taller, stronger, and wearing a badge that read, Director, Chief of Staff. The day of the all-hands meeting, the air in the conference room felt charged. Executives, VPs, managers, all gathered to welcome the new leadership. And there she was, Jane. When the new big shot introduced me, "This is Elena Ward, my Chief of Staff," I watched her face drain of color. That moment, that single moment was worth every sleepless night. I didn't know it then, but my revenge story was just getting started. ***, people think revenge starts with anger. It doesn't. It starts with silence, with the moment you stop crying and start planning. I walked back into that building the way a storm rolls over calm water, quiet, heavy, unstoppable. 3 months ago, I left those same doors broken. Now, my badge said director, and the people who once looked down on me stood when I entered the room. The lobby smelled exactly the same: coffee, carpet glue, faint perfume of ambition. But it felt different. Every footstep echoed with memories I didn't ask for. The meetings where Jane humiliated me. The phone calls that shattered my sleep. The day I cried into my keyboard. Now, every memory had a counterimage. Me walking in heels that clicked like punctuation marks. My laptop under my arm, head held high. Gary spotted me first. He stood, grinning. "Ellen Ward. Look at you." I smiled, and for the first time in months, it wasn't forced. "You look happier," he said. "I am," I replied. "It's amazing what quitting a nightmare does for the skin." He laughed, a little too loudly. The office loved Gary because he was kind, but I could see in his eyes a flicker of guilt. He'd tried to protect me, but the system hadn't. My first week was a blur of board decks, budgets, and strategy calls with the new executive, Marcus Reed, the man who'd brought me back. He was calm, sharp, decisive, the opposite of Jane. He trusted me instantly, handing off decisions that would have made my old self nervous. "Elena," he said one afternoon, "I didn't hire you to play it safe. I hired you to run things." That sentence hit me like sunlight after a long winter. I ran meetings now, the same ones Jane once used to control me. People leaned forward when I spoke. They took notes. They listened. But beneath the hum of progress, a different current ran. I could feel eyes on me. A few whispers died when I walked by, and every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of her. Jane, she still worked here, still strutting around like nothing had changed, though the cracks were starting to show. Her team looked smaller, tighter, nervous. Rumor had it 3 more people had resigned since I left. Every time our eyes met, I saw the disbelief. She couldn't stand at me, back here, higher than she'd ever reached. When you've been powerless, real power feels dangerous. The first time I signed off on someone's promotion, I felt a strange tremor of guilt, like I was touching something I wasn't supposed to. But Marcus kept reminding me, "You earned this. Stop apologizing for being good." So I started to play the corporate game differently. I built alliances quietly, lunches with senior VPs, one-on-ones with HR heads. Not gossip, not politics, strategy, and slowly, people began to confide in me. "Jane's at it again," one analyst said. "She screamed at Maya in front of everyone." Another whispered, "She told her you were manipulative. Just giving you a heads up." I'd nod, thank them, and keep moving. Inside, I felt the old heat rise, the urge to retaliate, to defend. But no, revenge doesn't rush. Revenge waits for paperwork. One late evening, the office was quiet except for the hum of air vents. I stopped by the bathroom mirror and studied my reflection. Same brown eyes, same tired lines, but something had changed. I didn't look scared anymore. My phone buzzed, a message from Marcus. "Presentation tomorrow. You've got this." 3 simple words, but they anchored me. I realized that the only person who'd ever truly doubted me was Jane, and I had believed her for too long. That night I stayed until midnight, perfecting slides, rehearsing my speech aloud in the empty conference room. Every sentence was a brick in the wall I was building between who I'd been and who I was becoming. The next morning, the presentation went flawlessly. Executives nodded. Marcus smiled. Applause followed. When the meeting ended, I stepped into the hallway, and there she was, Jane. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed, voice dipped in sugar. "Well, if it isn't our rising star. Chief of staff now, huh?" Big title for someone who couldn't schedule a meeting properly last year. I met her gaze. Calm. Funny, I said. Seems the company decided otherwise. Then I walked past her. Her perfume lingered like poison in the air. But for the first time, it didn't make me flinch. Behind me, I heard her hiss something under her breath, probably an insult, but I didn't turn round. Later that day, I overheard her yelling at one of her analysts. The same tone, the same cruelty. And suddenly, it hit me. I wasn't the only one she'd broken. There were others still living the nightmare I'd escaped. That realization didn't just give me strength, it gave me purpose. Over the next few weeks, I poured everything into rebuilding the culture I wished I'd had. I created open feedback sessions, anonymous surveys, weekly check-ins where people could speak freely. Word spread fast. Elena actually listens. People started coming to me with ideas, problems, and eventually stories. About Jane, about the shouting, the late calls, the passive-aggressive emails. I didn't record them, didn't forward them. Not yet. By late spring, the office had changed. You could feel it. Conversations didn't stop when I walked by anymore. They started. People smiled in the halls again. Even Gary looked lighter. Except Jane. Her voice carried from her corner like static, sharp, impatient, desperate to prove she still mattered. One afternoon she cornered me near the elevator. "Elena," she began, forcing a smile. "You seem busy. Mark is keeping you occupied with the big girl work?" Her tone was playful, but her eyes were venom. I tilted my head. "He keeps me busy making the place better. You should try it." The elevator doors slid open. I stepped in without waiting for a reply. The small victory warmed me all the way down to the lobby. She was cracking, and she knew it. A week later, Marcus asked me to sit in on Jane's quarterly review. I didn't react, though inside my pulse spiked. He wanted me there because I understood her numbers and because he trusted my read on people. Jane arrived late, papers rustling, excuses ready. Marcus went straight to the point. "Your department's turnover is 72%. That's not sustainable." She launched into explanations: market conditions, skill gaps, unreliable juniors, but every sentence dug the hole deeper. When she paused for breath, Marcus looked at me. "Elena, anything to add?" I kept my voice even. Her former staff reported working late nights and high stress. It's consistent with what I experienced before I left. The issue isn't talent, it's leadership style. For the first time, Jane didn't have words. Her pen tapped once, twice, then stilled. The room was silent enough to hear the air conditioner hum. Marcus nodded slowly. "We'll revisit this next quarter, but I expect improvement." When the meeting ended, Jane brushed past me, whispering, "You think you've won?" I whispered back, "No, Jane, I think I've survived." There's a difference. After that review, small things began to happen. Reports of Jane's temper, emails sent to the wrong people, snide remarks meant for allies landing in HR's inbox. An analyst quietly told me she'd been calling Marcus incompetent behind his back. I didn't interfere. I didn't need to. Every empire falls from within. My focus stayed on my team, on creating something solid, transparent, safe. The more trust we built, the weaker her kingdom became. It was almost midnight when I found the email. A copy of a message Jane had sent to Marcus months earlier trying to block my hire. She'd called me unstable and manipulative. The file was accidentally included in a data packet HR shared with me for audit. For a moment I just stared at it, fingers frozen on the keyboard. Then I laughed, quiet, disbelieving laughter that echoed off the cubicle walls. She had tried to bury me before I even came back. And now her words were documented, dated, signed with her name. I forwarded the file to a private folder, not out of malice but for record-keeping. Evidence, not revenge. Yet a small voice inside whispered, "This is how the tide turns." Marcus noticed the shift too. "She's losing ground," he said during one of our one-on-ones. "Don't get dragged into it." "I won't," I promised. "I'm done fighting ghosts." He smiled. "That's why you're here." Still, when I left the office that night, the air felt charged again like the pause before thunder. I could sense it. Jane was about to do something reckless. And I wasn't wrong. 2 days later, she snapped. I was walking through the open office when she stood up and called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "So tell me, Director Ward," she sneered, "how does it feel getting promoted for crying to HR?" The room went dead silent. Keys stopped clicking. Someone coughed and then froze. I turned slowly, heart thudding but voice steady. "It feels like being recognized for surviving what others were too afraid to report." The silence stretched. Then Gary, from across the room, said quietly, "That's enough." "Jane?" She glared at both of us, face red, and stormed out. Nobody followed her. Nobody even looked up until the door slammed. That was the last time she ever tried to humiliate me in public. HR called me in later that afternoon. Apparently several witnesses had filed incident reports. I told them I didn't want revenge, just peace. But I could see it in their eyes. This was the last straw for her. I walked out of that meeting lighter than I'd felt in years. Not victorious, free. Weeks passed. Jane avoided me completely now. Marcus and I rolled out new initiatives, built morale, and for the first time, the company started hitting goals again. I'd sit in meetings, watching teams collaborate, and think, this is what leadership is supposed to feel like. One Friday evening, as the office emptied, I opened my window blinds and looked out over the city. Rain streaked the glass, catching the light like tiny comets. I whispered to the reflection, "You made it back." It wasn't about Jane anymore. It was about reclaiming the part of myself I thought she'd erased. Just when I began to believe the storm had passed, an email landed in Marcus's inbox. From Jane, the subject line read, "Concerns about Elena Ward's qualifications." He forwarded it to me with one line, "Thought you'd want to see this." I stared at the screen, heartbeat steady. So this was how she wanted to play it. The final move of a desperate woman. I smiled. The end was closer than she knew. You know that feeling when your phone buzzes, and you can sense the chaos before you even read the message? That's what happened that morning. I just sat down with my coffee, second sip, still hot, when his name flashed on my screen. From David Hamilton, subject, forwarded email, need context. My pulse kicked. I clicked it open, and there it was. Jane's voice, unmistakable, dripping with arrogance. "Elena is completely unqualified for her new position. She was my subordinate before she lied and manipulated her way into this promotion. She's toxic for the team. I urge you to reconsider your decision before she causes further damage." She had even CC'd HR Europe, like she was trying to start a corporate war. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Not out of fear, out of disbelief. After everything, after all the hell she already put me through, she was still trying to claw at me. And I sat back in my chair, staring at that email. I didn't even realize I was smiling until I saw my reflection in the black screen. Because this time, I wasn't powerless anymore. 5 minutes later, David called. His tone was calm, but I could tell he was angry, not at me, but at the situation. "Elena, I just got this email from Jane something she claims she used to manage you." I laughed short. bitter sound that surprised even me. Oh, she did. And she managed to drive away half her team while she was at it. I see, he said slowly. Well, she seems unhinged. Can you explain what this is about? So I told him everything, not in a rushed, defensive way. No, in the calm, measured tone of someone who's already won. I explained how she'd micromanaged me to the edge of a breakdown, how she'd called me names, humiliated me, and screamed in front of others, how she'd ignored HR warnings and made others quit. By the time I finished, David was silent. Then he asked quietly, "Do you still have the documentation?" I smiled. Oh, I have everything. My resignation letter, her comments, the HR reports, even her old emails. I kept it all. That silence on the other end? That was the sound of a man calculating exactly how deep the rot ran. Forward me everything, he said finally, and thank you for being patient through this. We'll handle it. It didn't take long. By noon, HR had called Gary in for context. By 2, every VP who'd ever complained about Jane was whispering about that email. And by the next morning, Jane wasn't in her seat. You could feel it. That strange energy when everyone in an office knows something big is about to happen. People were walking on tiptoe, glancing at each other, pretending to work while their screens glowed with chat windows. Gary stopped by my desk around lunch, his eyes wide. Did you see what's going on? I just nodded. I think I know. He hesitated, then leaned closer. They're pulling her emails. All of them. Every single message she's sent in the last year. I felt that rush of adrenaline again. Not joy exactly, but justice. It wasn't petty anymore. It was right. 2 days later, Jane showed up. Late. Her face pale, her expression pinched. Everyone looked up as she stormed through the hallway, her heels slamming against the tile like gunshots. She went straight into a conference room. HR was waiting. The blinds were half closed, but you could see shapes moving, gestures, voices raised. For 20 minutes, the whole floor went silent. Even the printer seemed to stop. Then, suddenly, the door burst open. Jane came out, face red, eyes glassy, muttering something under her breath. She didn't look at anyone. She just walked straight to her desk, yanked open a drawer, and started tossing things into a box. Someone whispered, "She's fired." I didn't move. I just watched. There was no gloating, no smirk, just quiet satisfaction. The kind that settles deep in your chest when the universe finally evens the score. When she turned to leave, her eyes met mine for a second. Pure venom. Then she was gone. That evening, I stayed late at the office. Everyone else had gone home, but I couldn't. I just sat there, letting it all sink in. I thought about the nights I cried myself to sleep, the mornings I forced myself to smile through panic attacks, the weeks of doubt and fear. And now, silence, no late-night calls, no insults, just peace. I took out my phone and opened my notes app, where, a year ago, I'd written, "Don't forget this. Someday, you'll need to remember how far you've come." I smiled, because I finally had. A few days later, I got an email from HR. They thanked me for my cooperation and said the investigation had confirmed unprofessional and discriminatory conduct. They didn't name her, but I didn't need them to. I closed the email and leaned back in my chair. Outside, the city lights blinked like tiny stars on the glass. I typed one last message. Not to her, not to anyone, just to myself. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and that's enough. Then I locked my screen, stood up, and walked out into the night. You know, What's funny about revenge? It never looks how you imagine. You think it's fire and fury, shouting, victory dances, people gasping as the villain falls. But when it actually happens, it's quiet, like standing at the end of a storm, realizing the thunder is gone, and you can finally breathe again. That's how it felt after Jane was gone. For weeks, I expected something, some ripple, some last jab, but there was nothing. No emails, no whispers, no poison in the air. Just calm, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could hear myself think. The next Monday, I walked into the office earlier than usual. The sun was still sliding through the windows, turning the floors gold. I sat at my new desk, the same one I'd once dreamed of from the other side of the office, and opened my notebook. The first line on the page was something I'd written months ago. Prove them wrong, but don't lose yourself doing it. I smiled, because I had finally done both. My team had grown since the transition. We were small but solid, the kind of group that laughed during meetings and actually listened to each other. The air was different now, lighter, honest. When people passed me in the hall, they didn't look at me like I was the girl Jane used to scream at. They looked at me like someone who'd earned her seat. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not pretending the scars aren't there, but realizing they make your story impossible to erase. A few weeks later, David called me into his office. He had that look, serious but proud, like someone about to hand you a secret. "You've done an incredible job, Elena," he said. "You've cleaned up the mess Jane left behind and rebuilt this team in record time." I laughed softly. "Well, I had good reason. You've proven something more important than that," he said, leaning forward. "That leadership isn't about control. It's about trust. You've changed the culture here." Then he smiled. "I want to make it official. I'd like you to take over as director of operations." For a second, I just stared at him. Me, the same woman who'd once cried in a bathroom stall because of Jane's words. The same woman who'd been told she wasn't qualified enough, now being handed a title she used to whisper about like it was untouchable. I accepted, of course. But what mattered more wasn't the job. It was what it meant. That I hadn't just survived her. I'd outgrown her. That evening, as I was leaving, Gary stopped by my office. He had that tired but kind smile he always wore. "You know," he said, "when you left the first time, I thought the company had lost someone special. I just didn't know we'd get you back like this." I felt a lump rise in my throat. "You always believed me, Gary, when no one else did." He shrugged. "Sometimes the good ones just need time to prove it." He turned to go. But before he left, he added, "You know, Jane's gone for good. HR made it official. It's over." I nodded slowly. "I know, and that's enough." The days that followed felt surreal. Every time I passed Jane's old office, now empty and stripped bare, it reminded me of how fragile power really is. She'd built her empire on fear, but fear crumbles fast when truth shows up. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted peace, so one Friday evening, long after everyone else had left, I sat in my chair with the city lights flickering outside and opened an old draft. The resignation letter I'd stapled with her comments. I read every word. Every insult, every wound she'd left. And then, quietly, I hit delete. It was over. 2 months later, the company hosted its annual leadership summit. It was my first time on the stage, not as an assistant, not as an observer, but as a speaker. I talked about rebuilding teams, about empathy, about how failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the road to it. And when I said, "You can't lead people you don't respect," the room went completely silent. Afterward, dozens of people came up to me. New employees, old ones, even HR staff, thanking me for changing the energy here. That night, as I stood by the window overlooking the city skyline, I realized something. Jane's story ended with anger. Mine was still being written, but it was finally mine. Later, at home, I sat at my desk and opened my journal, the same one that had seen me through sleepless nights, rejection emails, and tear-stained pages. I wrote one final note. Dear past me, you thought the world ended the day she broke you. You thought you'd never recover, never stand tall again. But here you are, leading, healing, thriving. You didn't destroy her to win. You outgrew her, and that's the best revenge there is. I closed the journal and looked around my quiet home, the warm light, the soft hum of the evening, and felt something I hadn't in years, peace. The next morning, when I walked into the office, David was greeting a new round of hires. He waved me over. Team, meet Elena, he said proudly. She's one of the reasons this place feels different now. They clapped. I smiled. And in that moment, with laughter echoing through the same halls that once carried her cruelty, I knew it for certain. You can't control what people do to you, but you can choose how your story ends. And mine? Mine ended standing tall, smiling, and finally free.